You're watching the chapter number 4 of the Blender modeling course, where we learn to create a 3D model of camera and also understand about the usage of some important modeling tools, techniques, modifiers and a lot more. And yes, if you are new to the Blender modeling course, then you can watch the previous 3 chapters where we created the 3D model of a pocket watch, a guitar and a radio by clicking on the link given in the description. So I have created a new Blender file, and just like always, the first step to begin modeling anything should be to have some reference images. And since we'll be modeling a camera, so I searched for some camera images on Google and I have selected this particular image which will be used as the reference image for the camera model. And yes, I have also dropped the link of this reference image of the camera in the description of this video. So after downloading it, we'll return back to the Blender file, and to add the reference image, we need to create an image editor window. So for this, take the cursor over here, then the double-headed arrow will appear, right click and select horizontal split. After this, I'll take this line to approximately half the area of the properties editor, then left click, and to change this lower window into the image editor, click on this icon and from here select the image editor. After this, to import the reference image, click on the open button, then open that particular folder where you have saved the reference image, then left click to select it and click on open image. After this, the reference image will get added in the image editor and we can now begin with the actual modeling of the camera in Blender. So first of all, to give this cube the basic shape of a camera, press tab to enter the edit mode, and we'll first scale it up in the y-axis by pressing S and Y and scale it up like this, and to give it some height, we'll scale it up in the z-axis. Let's also increase the scaling in the x-axis like this. After this, if I zoom into the reference image, then you can see that this right part of the camera is slightly more upwards on the top as compared to the left part. And to make such a geometry for this cube, we first need to add a loop cut. So press Ctrl plus R to add a loop cut, then left click and we'll drag it to the specific position. Now left click to finalize, and with this we are having two separate faces on the top of camera. Right now I will select this smaller face and we have to extrude it in the z-axis. So press E to extrude it and left click to finalize. Now press 2 for the edge select mode, select this edge and we'll move it in the y-axis. Now left click to finalize. Now return back to the object mode, and to give the camera a more rounded or a natural appearance, we'll use the bevel modifier. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. Now in the segments, I'll enter a value of 8 and we'll increase the amount to a value of somewhere around 0.2 meters. Now even though we have applied the bevel modifier on this object, but still it feels like we should increase the amount of roundness around these edges of the camera. And to do this thing, press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything by left clicking in the 3D viewport, and then we'll be selecting all these corner edges. And since we are selecting multiple edges, so also hold down the shift button in order to select all of them at once. Let's select these two also, and to make them rounded, press Ctrl plus B to turn on the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then you will notice that some slight roundness is being added to the corner edges. In fact, if I use the scroll wheel to increase the number of segments, then the amount of roundness will further increase. So I'll keep the number of segments to around 7 or 8 and then left click to finalize and then return back to the object mode. With this, we are having a much better shape for the camera model. Now to make this smooth, simply right click and select shade auto smooth. Now let's work on creating some buttons for the camera. In this reference image, you can notice that we are having some very simple buttons for the camera which can easily be created just by adding some cylinders and scaling them down. But for our 3D model of the camera, we'll be making the camera buttons a little more detailed because we use a reference image only to get an idea of the basic geometry of the object which is being modeled. We'll not be copying the exact shape or the structure of the camera given in the reference image. Now coming back to the topic of creating the camera control buttons, let's first add a cylinder in our scene. But to ensure that it gets placed on this top surface, we'll first place our 3D cursor at some point on the top surface. So first of all, we'll be creating one of the buttons at this position where we extruded the face. So to place the 3D cursor at this place, simply hold the shift button and then right click over here, and now we have the position of the 3D cursor changed to this location. Now to add the cylinder, press shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder. After this, press tab to enter the edit mode, and first we'll scale it down to reduce its size. Let's also scale it down in the z-axis like this. Now to create the upper part of the control, first deselect everything, then press 3 for the face select mode, select the top face of the cylinder, and first of all, we'll apply the inset faces effect by pressing I and moving the cursor towards the cylinder. Now left click to finalize, and the reason for using the inset faces effect is that we wanted to extrude this face up in the z-axis, but we wanted the upper part of the control to be slightly smaller as compared to the lower part. So by using the inset tool, we created this smaller face which we'll now extrude. So press E to extrude it up in the z-axis and left click to finalize. After this, with the top face selected, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away, then you can see that it is already having a particular number of segments which it has taken depending depending upon the last time we used the bevel tool. And yes, you can also check the number of segments on this top left corner where it shows that the number of segments is equal to 8 and the offset, which is basically the bevel effect, which I can change by moving the cursor away and towards the cylinder, also gets displayed along with the number of segments. But for now, I'll keep the number of segments to 8 and the offset value to around 0.12 meters. Now left click to finalize, and with all the edges selected, I'll move them slightly upwards in the Z axis. Then left click to finalize, and let's also scale this down like this. Now return back to the object mode, and with the control selected, we'll move it up in the Z axis like this. Moving ahead, let's also create some more buttons to be placed on the top of camera. So first of all, we'll switch to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Then with the control selected, we'll create a duplicate by pressing Shift plus P, and we'll move it in the Y axis like this. So let's place one of the controls over here, then create one more duplicate, and we'll place it along the first one. So let's place it over here. Now switch to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, or maybe let's go to the side view. Now I'll select both of them and move them down in the Z axis like this. Also, let's change their size. So first of all, I'll select this one, press tab to enter the edit mode, then press A to select all. Now press S to scale it down like this. Now get back to the object mode, go to the side view again, and let's again move it down in the Z axis. After this, let's slightly change its position in the Y axis like this. Similarly, we need one more button like the smaller one to be placed along with it. So for this, I'll select this control and press X to delete it. Then with this one selected, I'll create a duplicate and move it in the Y axis. So let's place this over here, and now we are having 3 different controls on the top of camera. Now in order to give these buttons a natural appearance, we'll be using the bevel modifier. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. After this, I'll go to the segments value and enter 8, and in the amount, I will be using the default value of 0.1 meters. Then right click and select shade auto smooth. Similarly, I'll select this control now, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, I'll increase this to a value of 8, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. And at last, I will select this particular control, then go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, I'll enter 8, then right click and apply shade auto smooth. Also, for those of you who don't know how the bevel modifier works, it does the same operation as the bevel tool in the edit mode. It bevels or adds a rounding appearance to the vertices or the edges, whichever is selected in the bevel modifier. Then the amount is basically the offset, which we also change in the edit mode. For example, if I press Ctrl plus B with all these edges selected and try to move my cursor away, then you will notice that on this top left corner, the offset value is changing, and this offset value is same as the amount value in the bevel modifier. Then we have the number of segments, and in the bevel tool also, you can see that whenever I select a particular edge loop and apply the bevel tool to it, then by using the scroll wheel, I can set a particular number of segments, and a similar function can also be done in the bevel modifier with the help of number of segments. Now moving ahead, let's return back to the object mode, and we'll now create the camera lens. So for this thing, let's first add a cylinder in our scene. So press Shift plus A, then go to mesh and select the cylinder, and right now it is placed at this position because of the placement of 3D cursor. But to get the 3D cursor back on the world origin, simply press Shift plus C. With this, we are now having the 3D cursor back at the original position. Now to place the cylinder at the same position as that of the 3D cursor, simply hold down Shift plus S, and then this snap menu will appear, where if I take my cursor over the selection to cursor option, then in this case, the position of the cylinder will change from this point to the world origin or the 3D cursor. Now press tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and with all the edges selected, we'll rotate it in the Y axis by 90 degrees. Now to change the scaling, press 3 on the numpad to go to the side view, and we'll scale it up like this. Then left click to finalize. Let's change the angle, and to move it, let's return back to the object mode and also turn off the X-ray mode. Now press G and X and move it like this. Also, let's slightly scale it down in the X axis. So press tab to enter the edit mode again, and let's scale it down in the X axis like this. After this, press 3 for the face select mode, select this front face, and now we'll apply the inset tool on this face in order to create some extrusions for the lens object. So press I to inset, then left click, and we'll extrude this face in the X axis. Now it depends upon you that how many extrusions you want to create for the camera lens. If you want, you can reduce the distance between individual extrusions and have a large number of extrusions, but in this case, we'll be going with only 3 extrusions for the camera lens. Now moving ahead, we'll also extrude this face slightly inwards in order to create the hollow space in the front part of the lens. So for this, let's first apply the inset faces effect by pressing I, then left click, and press E to extrude it inwards like this. After this, I'll again apply the inset faces effect by pressing I and press E to extrude it one more time. And with this, we have now created the basic geometry of the camera lens. To give it a much more natural look, we'll go back to the object mode, and with the camera lens selected, go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. And now even with the default values, you can see that our camera lens is now having a completely different look than before. Previously, if I press Ctrl plus Z, then the camera lens looked like this, very simple and basic. But now, if I redo by pressing Ctrl plus Shift and Z, then it is having a much more natural and a realistic appearance. Now I'll go to the bevel modifier, and in the number of segments, let's increase this to 6 or 8, and let's also reduce the amount from here. So we'll keep this to something like 0.02 or 0.03, and after this, simply right click and apply Shade Auto Smooth. And after all this, we now have the basic body of the camera ready, the camera lens ready, and even some simple controls that we have placed on the top of camera's body. Now moving ahead, let's work on creating some more details for the 3D model of this camera. So first of all, in the reference image, we are having a flashlight, and to create this, we'll first add a plane object. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select the plane, then press Tab to enter the edit mode. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and we rotate this in the Y-axis by 90 degrees. After this, return back to the object mode, turn off the X-ray mode, and let's move it in the Y-axis over here, and along with that, let's also move it forward in the X-axis. So press G, X and place it over here. After this, press 1 on the numpad, and we'll move it slightly more forward in the X-axis like this, in such a way that it aligns with the front part of the camera. After this, go to the edit mode by pressing the tab key. Let's also turn on the X-ray mode, and we'll extrude this slightly forward in the X-axis. Then left click to finalize, return back to the object mode, and let's also turn off the X-ray mode. Moving ahead, to fix the position of this object, I'll first move it up in the Z-axis and place it over here, then tab into the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll scale this down in the Z-axis. After this, let's also scale it down in the Y-axis, then go to the object mode, and let's slightly displace it in the Y-axis. After all this, we'll now apply the inset face effect on this front face for the flashlight. So press I for the inset tool, then left click, and we'll extrude this face slightly backwards like this. Let's also scale it down and left click to finalize. After this, we have the flashlight and the holder ready for a camera. To give it a natural look, we'll go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the bevel modifier. Then in the number of segments, let's increase this to a value of 6, and in the amount, we'll be going with the default value of 0.1 meters. Let's now work on one more thing, which is to scale down this middle region of the camera's body. And for this, I'll first select both the lens and the flashlight, press H to hide them, select the camera's body, press tab to enter the edit mode, and now we have to select all these faces in this middle area of the camera's body. So for this, go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and with the face selection mode enabled, we'll select all these faces in the middle. Now to scale them down, we'll basically use the extrude faces along normals. So press Alt plus E, and this extrude menu will appear, from which we'll be selecting the extrude faces along normals. So I'll select this, and if I move my cursor away, then you will notice that the extrusion effect is now being applied to all the faces that we have selected, and since the name of this tool is extrude faces along normals, as a result, all the faces are getting extruded along their respective normals. So once you have adjusted the size of extrusion, simply left click to finalize, and if I return back to the object mode and also unhide the camera lens and the flashlight by pressing Alt plus H, then now you can observe that there's a significant difference in how realistic this 3D model of the camera is now looking. Also, it is suggested to turn on the cavity option in the viewport shading settings that can be accessed by clicking on this icon. Also, back in the 3D viewport, I'll select this flashlight and move it slightly upwards in the Z-axis in order to align it with the upper body of the camera. And right now, I think that there's nothing else that we need to change in this camera model. And so we'll now work on creating some simple materials for this camera. So first of all, I'll select the camera's body, and to create a material, we'll open the material properties editor. So click on this icon for the material properties, and by default, we have this material added, which is white in color. To see how it looks, let's switch to the rendered view. Also, for a better lighting, in the viewport, click on this icon, and in the lighting, turn off the scene lights and the scene world. And since we'll be rendering the image of this camera in the Cycles render engine, so go to the render properties by clicking here, and in the render engine, change this from EV to Cycles. After this, with the body of camera selected, we'll again return back to the material properties in order to create a black color material for it. So in the material, I'll first go to the base color, and to make it look black, go to the brightness slider and reduce the brightness. After this, in order to give it a slightly metallic appearance, I'll go to the metallic property and will increase this from 0 to 0.5. Let's also reduce the roughness value, so I'll bring it down to 0.2 or 0.3, and now this camera body is having a black colored material with a slight metallic look. After this, in the reference image, you can see that the middle part of the camera is having a different material, then the upper part is having a different one, and the lower part is again having some other material. So in our camera model also, we'll be using this black color only for the main body, which is in the middle, but for the upper and the lower parts, we'll be creating a different material which will be brown in color. So for this, go to the material properties, let's scroll up and create a new material by clicking on the plus button. Then click on the new button, and in order to assign those particular faces of the parts of this object for which we have created this new material, we'll first switch back to the solid mode, then press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything, and to select the top and the bottom faces, let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, press Alt plus Z to turn on the X-ray mode, and I'll now select all these faces on the top. Now to assign this new material that we created to the selected faces, click on the assign button. Similarly, I'll deselect them and will now select these bottom faces. After this, click on the assign button again, and with this, if I go to the rendered preview mode, then now we are having this black colored material only in the middle part of the camera. Now return back to the object mode by pressing tab, and for this new material, we'll be changing the base color to brown. So go to the base color, then reduce the brightness, and then we'll change this to the brown color. Let's reduce the brightness even further in order to make the brown color even darker. After this, we'll increase the metallic value from 0 to somewhere around 0.4 or 0.5 in order to give this a reflecting surface. Let's also reduce the roughness value down to 0.3 or 0.2, and with this, the camera body is now having two separate materials. One of them is the black color in the middle, and the other one is the brown color on the top and the bottom. Also, if you want, you can create another material for the bottom part just like the one in the image. But for now, we'll be going with this brown material only for both the top and the bottom part. After this, let's now create the camera lens material. So I'll select the lens of camera, then go to the material properties, click on the new button, and in the base color, we'll be selecting the black color. Then in the metallic nature, I'll keep the value to the default 0 and even the roughness to its default value of 0.5. Then to create a transparent material for the front face of the camera lens, press tab to enter the edit mode, select the front face, then in the material properties, click on the plus icon, new material, and to assign the specific material to the selected face, click on the assign button. After this, in order to make this face transparent, go to the material properties, scroll down, and over here you have a section named as the transmission. In this, we have the weight option, and this basically controls the amount of transmission, or in simple words, how much transparent the material for an object will be. So in the weight, if I enter a value of 0.8 or 0.9, then this will make the front face of the camera lens transparent. After this, let's now create this metallic lining which you can see in the reference image around the lens of camera. So for this, let's first create a new material by clicking on the new button, then go to the solid mode, and with the camera lens selected, press tab to enter the edit mode, then deselect everything, and we'll now select all these faces which are here on the outer edge of the camera lens. So to select them, press the Alt key, then left click here, and with this particular face loop will get selected. However, it might be possible that if you hold the Alt button and left click here, then some other face loop will also get selected. And the reason behind this is that the selected face loop will depend on the position of your cursor when you left click on the loop. For example, if I hold the Alt button and left click on this particular edge over here, then you will notice that it will always select the required face loop, and this is because by keeping the cursor over this edge while selecting the face loop, we are telling Blender that we want to select the entire loop of faces in the pattern of the selected edge. You can see here that this selected edge is placed in such a way that the next one in the series will be over here, then the next one will be over here, and it goes on throughout the face loop. As a result, by holding the Alt button, if I left click on any of these edges, then the entire face loop will get selected. Similarly, to select multiple face loops, we have to hold down both Shift and Alt and then left click to select that particular face loop. Similarly, let's select this one also, and after this, in the material properties, I'll select this new material that we created and click on the assign button, then return back to the object mode, and let's now switch to the rendered view. Now to make this white color on these outer edges look metallic, we'll go to the material properties, and in the metallic value, I'll enter 0.8 or 0.9, and in the roughness, we'll bring this down to 0.2 or 0.3, and now this material is having a metallic look. After this, we'll be using the same material, which is material.004, for these camera buttons. So I'll select this one, and to apply the same material, click on this icon and select that specific material. After this, let's repeat the same procedure for this control also. So I'll select this material from here, and at last, I'll select this control and repeat the same procedure for this one as well. Now at last, I'll select this flashlight, and first of all, I will assign this the same material that we used for the camera's body, but for the flashlight in the middle, we'll create a new material. So go to the material properties, click on the plus icon, create a new material, and to assign this material to a particular face, press tab to enter the edit mode, deselect everything, and we'll now select this face in the middle. Now I'll select that new material and click on the assign button. After this, return back to the object mode, and since this will be the flashlight, as a result, we'll be using the emission settings in the material properties. So in the emission strength, we'll enter a value of 1, and in the emission color, I'll change this to slightly yellow. And with this, the body of a camera looks almost perfect. And so in the end, let's now work on the lighting and the rendering part. So go to the solid mode, press A to select all, then to deselect the camera and the light, hold down the control button and deselect both of them. Now we'll move the camera up in the Z axis like this and place it over here. After this, we'll be adding a plane below the camera. So press Shift plus A, then go to Mesh and select the plane. Press Tab to enter the edit mode and we'll scale it up 10 times. After this, while being in the object mode, I'll bring it down slightly and left click to finalize. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and to change the view, click on this icon. Let's zoom out and use the middle mouse button to change the camera view. After this, with the plane selected, we'll again scale it up. So press Tab to enter the edit mode again and scale it up like this. Then while being in the edit mode, press 2 for the edge select mode. Select this edge at the back and we'll extrude it up in the Z axis. Then left click to finalize, and then to make the back part slightly more curved, I'll select this edge, press Ctrl plus B to apply the bevel tool, and if I move my cursor away and use the middle mouse button to increase the number of segments, then we are now having a curved appearance. Also, I'll scale this up in the Y axis like this to make sure that the plane is covering the entire camera view. Now return back to the object mode, and to make this part smooth at the back of the plane, right click and select Shade Auto Smooth. Let's also turn off the lock camera to view by clicking on this icon, and we'll now switch back to the rendered view. Now with the plane selected, click here to create a new material, and in the base color, I'll first reduce the brightness and then I'll change this color to the blue color. Let's slightly increase the brightness, and after this, let's now work on the lighting part. To see how our scene will look in the final render, click on this icon and turn on the scene lights and the scene world. After this, go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and with this lamp selected, we'll move it forward and place it over here. Then create a duplicate of it by pressing Shift plus B, and we'll move it in the Y axis and place it over here. Then for some more lights, I'll select both of them, create their duplicate and move them in the X axis like this. Let's do this thing one more time. So press Shift plus D, move it in the X axis and place the lights over here. Now press 0 on the numpad to go to the camera view, and we are now having a very basic lighting setup for this camera. To make it even better, let's first switch to the solid mode, and now I'll select this light, go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, or maybe press Ctrl plus 3 for the other side, and with the lamp selected, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and we'll place it in front of the camera. Then in the power, I'll reduce this to 400 watts, and just like this, I'll create one more duplicate of this light and we'll move it in the Y axis over here. Now let's change the angle, and to see how it looks, let's go to the rendered preview mode, and we are now having slightly better lighting for this camera. But to make it even more perfect, with the light selected, I'll create a duplicate by pressing Shift plus D, move it up in the Z axis. Let's also move it in the Y axis and place it over here. After this, I will select these 3 lights on the left hand side and will move them in the Y axis like this. Similarly, I'll select these 3 now and move them slightly away from the camera in the Y axis. Now to create some colorful lighting effects, I'll select one of the lights, create a duplicate, move it in the Y axis like this. Then in the color, I'll change this to the blue color. Similarly for the other side, I'll select this light, create a duplicate, move it in the Y axis, and in the color, I'll change this one to the pink color. Now to see how it looks, let's go to the rendered preview mode, and the reason why we are not able to see a lot of influence of the colored lights is that we have added these 2 lights with the white color. So I'll delete both of them by pressing X, and let's also bring the 2 colored lights closer in the Y axis in order to create a slight lighting effect. So let's move them in the Y axis like this. Then in the end, I'll select this light over here, move it slightly upwards, and to increase its power, I'll go to the object data properties and increase this back to 1000 watt. Now let's see how it looks, and finally this is how the camera is looking in our scene. Now let's change the camera view. So click here and we'll change this to the perfect view in order to render the final image. After this, I'll also change the color of this background. So I'll select this plane, go to the base color, and I'll change the color to slightly more dark blue, and now it looks perfect. Now to render the image, click on the render button and select render image. Then in a new window, the rendering will start. Here we can see this camera being rendered along with the materials that we created. For now, I'll close this window, and with this, we have now arrived to the end of this chapter. Today we learned about the modeling of this camera, and along with that, we even discussed about some new modeling techniques that we used while modeling the various parts of the camera, like its main body, the camera lens, the controls of camera, flashlight, and in the end, we even created a simple lighting effect in order to render the image of this camera. And yes, if you manage to complete this entire chapter and even create a final render of the camera, then do share the results on the Discord server, whose link is available in the description of this video. Apart from this, if you want to download the 3D model of this camera that I have modeled in this chapter, then you can join the Patreon, whose link is available in the description of this video. And so our next chapter will be the chapter number 5, where we'll model a leather couch or a sofa in Blender. While doing this, we learn about some new modeling tools, their practical usage, and in this way, we learn how to take our 3D models to the next level. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.